All right, recording is started. Welcome to Friday, January 7th, back to school if you weren't here yesterday. So you guys just watched CGP Grey video on themes. Hopefully get something out of that and able to organize your year a little bit better and prove yourself based on that. Oh, whoops. That's for my AP kids. Here's you guys, right? Well, skip to next week and then come back to here. The next topic that we're going to cover is simple harmonic motion and waves. So we'll start that on Monday. If this point is relevant to you, if you have to make up a midterm, those are going to be in the Media Center next week. So Media Center after school, you can make up any exams that you made this back in December. Right. Today, I've got some science articles for you guys. I've done activities in the past where I've had students like read or summarize science articles. And this is for a lot of you guys, probably your only science class. So figured I'd do a similar type activity. Tell you guys where I found these. So I just went to the science subreddit and just found whatever was upvoted last night, just the most popular articles. The things I thought you guys might possibly be interested in too. I've got, we've got 5 or 10 different articles here. So just going to start reading through these and you guys can see what kind of new science is out there, physics or not. One thing that I hope you guys get out of school is just a love for learning in general. So like even after you graduate high school and move on, just keep staying curious and maybe you want to check in on things like this. Hey, I'm wondering what new science is coming out in the world. And I mean, this is just what I randomly found out last night. There's a lot of cool articles here. So first one, dog brains can distinguish between languages. Dog brains can detect speech and show different activity patterns to a familiar and an unfamiliar language. A new brain imaging study by researchers at Department of Ethology at this university in Hungary have found. I looked up ethology. I don't remember ever come across that word before. It says, according to Google, ethology, the science of animal behavior, or the study of human behavior and social organization from a biological perspective, right? So study of animal behavior. Right? Oh, look at this doggy. It looks like he's in an MRI machine, I think. This one is. Image, dog brains can detect speech and show different activity patterns to familiar and unfamiliar language. New brain imaging study by researchers from Department of Ethology finds this is the first demonstration that a non-human brain can differentiate between two languages. Work has been published in Neuroimage. Dog brains can detect speech and show different activity patterns to familiar and unfamiliar language. A new brain imaging study by researchers at Department of Ethology finds the first, this university in Hungary. Let's see, Bose Laurent. This is the first demonstration that a non-human brain can differentiate between two languages. Some years ago, here's the researcher talking. This is Laura Quaya. Some years ago, I moved from Mexico to Hungary to join the Neuroethology of Communication Lab at the Department of Ethology, Bose Laurent University, for my postdoctoral research. My dog, Kun Kun, came with me. Before, I had only talked to him in Spanish. So I was wondering whether Kun Kun had noticed that people in Budapest spoke a different language, Hungarian. Says Laura Quaya, first author of the study. We know that people, even pre-verbal human infants, do notice the differences between languages. But what about dogs? Maybe dogs do not bother? After all, Kun Kun and 17 other dogs were trained to lay motionless in a brain scanner. Ooh, that was probably a tricky part of this, this whole setup, train a dog to lay motionless in that machine, where we played them speech excerpts of The Little Prince in both Spanish and Hungarian. All dogs had heard only one of the two languages from their owners. So this is a way we could compare a highly familiar language with a completely unfamiliar one. We also played the dogs scrambled versions of these excerpts, which sound completely unnatural. to test whether they could detect the difference between speech and non-speech at all. When comparing brain responses to speech and non-speech, researchers found distinct activity patterns in dogs' primary auditory context. This distinction was there independently of whether the stimuli originated from the familiar or unfamiliar language. There was, however, no evidence that dog brains would have a neural preference for speech over non-speech, right? That's a double version. So they did different sub-experiments here. So dog brains, like human brains, can distinguish between speech and non-speech, but the mechanism underlying the speech detection ability may be different from speech sensitivity in humans. Whereas human brains are specially tuned to speech, dog brains may simply detect the naturalness of the sound. In addition to speech detection, dog brains could also distinguish between Spanish and Hungarian. So they didn't know that there was some difference going on. These language-specific activity patterns were found in another brain region, the secondary auditory cortex. Interestingly, the older the dog was, the better their brain distinguished between the familiar and unfamiliar language. Each language is characterized by a variety of auditory regularities. Our findings suggest that during their lives with humans, dogs pick up on those auditory regularities of the language that they are exposed to, says Hernandez Perez, Raul Hernandez Perez, the co-author of the study. So this is okay, so throwing my own comments here. But this is one of those things that I always think is amazing, that it's easy to take for granted, especially if you never thought about this, that for example, I could have some idea in my head, I can make these grunting sounds, there's some pressure wave that goes to the air, hits your eardrums, and then you have a very hopefully similar type idea going on in your head. Like we can transfer ideas just through these grunting and pressure waves. But in humans are just like really good at it. I mean, we're just like built for this. I mean, we just like have this innate ability to do this that other animals don't. So now scientists are looking at other animals, in this case specifically dogs. So the question of other animals comes up later. But can dogs sort of latch onto this ability or have any part of this, like language interpretation? I mean, outside of this paper, dogs can know some number of words. If you have pets of your own, you probably notice this, that they know like certain words. Think about too, other languages. Like even if you don't know like certain other languages, sometimes you can sort of pick out like, this sounds kind of like French, or this sounds sort of like Chinese, or something like that. Even if you don't know specifically what the words are. And it looks like dogs probably have that ability too. This study showed for the first time that non-human brain can distinguish between two languages. It is exciting because it reveals that the capacity to learn about the regularities of a language is not uniquely human. Still, we do not know whether this capacity is dog specialty or general among non-human species. It is possible that the brain changes from tens of thousands of years that dogs have been living with humans to make them better language listeners, but this is not necessarily the case. Future studies will have to find this out, concludes Attila Andes, senior author of the study. The idea he's getting at here is now they're starting to learn about other animals. Do other animals also have this ability to detect a difference in human languages? Like, oh, that's Hungarian versus that's Spanish. And an idea that this is possibly limited to, again, nobody knows, it's an open question. But this could specifically be a dog trait because dogs have been domesticated for so many thousands of years. Right? Dogs are technically the same species as wolves, but they're really like completely different animals. Right? So the fact that dogs have lived with so much or for so long, we're talking about tens of thousands of years, right? Their DNA has adapted to, well, they sort of like evolved along with us. I think dogs are either the only or one of the only animals that will actually like look you in the eye, or if you point at something, they understand that you're pointing at something. So they can pick up on certain human cues that other animals can't. This is outside this paper. It's just I said it right before, but now they're looking at language specifically. And if you're wondering how Kun Kun is doing after moving to Budapest, he leaves just as, I think it's supposed to be lives just as happily as he lived in Mexico City. He saw snow for the first time, and he loved swimming in the Danube River. We hope that he and his friends will continue to help us uncover the evolution of speech perception. Next article. only 9% of teens meet physical activity guidelines during the pandemic, down from 16% pre-pandemic. Right, so just from that headline, say you rewind the clock to a few years ago, 2019, 16% as a fraction, that's approximately 1 out of 6. So only one out of 6 of your guys' demographic were getting enough physical activity, enough exercise. I mean, the way we structured our society is, I mean, you guys see it right now, right? You're sitting in rows and staring at the screen, listening to me, and that's kind of how we set things up. And hopefully you're lucky enough to have either PE class or maybe built into your own life schedule some time to like take a walk or ride a bike or do calisthenics or something. But hey, it's a new year, so if you're starting to think about what things do I want to try new, maybe I'm post-pandemic, those numbers been like cut in half. Maybe you're in the like 90-something% that's like not getting enough exercise. You might want to think about that. Getting enough exercise is also good for your mental health too. Right? Help you out in school, get your brain going. Declines in physical activity are linked to poorer mental health and higher stress. This is from University of Toronto. That's a side detail too, is that whenever you read these articles, there's always, there's some science journalist that's taken some paper and just trying to strip it down to information that's good for the public to know. But what these numbers, these coming out of Canada? Is this like out of a Canadian population? Maybe not 100% sure on that, but it's one of those details that just to think about whenever you're reading a science article. It's like, I wonder what did or didn't make it into here. And sometimes even a science journalist will misinterpret something, and then the researcher looks at the article and says, that's not what my research even said. But this New Year's Day, parents might want to resolve to get more exercise, bring their teenage children along. A new national study, so maybe this is just Canada, finds that only 9% of teens, approximately 1 in 10, 1 in 11, met the recommended 60 minutes of physical activity per day during the pandemic, a decline from the 16% pre-pandemic. The pandemic led to the cancellation of in-person physical education classes and organized sports, gym, recreational facility closures, rises in screen use, which all contributed to lower physical activity for teens, says Jason Nagata, medical doctor, assistant professor of pediatrics at University of California, San Francisco. Okay. Now, I think lead author, San Francisco, that's the States. I'm not sure exactly what population it's referring to. The study found that lower physical activity was linked to poorer mental health, greater stress, or worry about the pandemic. This physical activity, do want to mention too, this is a what you might call a correlation. So the fact that you're getting less physical activity and you might be more worried about the pandemic, those are correlated to each other. Now, side issue, is there causation there? Does it mean that less physical activity results in you getting more worried about the pandemic? Maybe, maybe not. That's sort of an open question, but there is a correlation, is what they're saying. Correlation versus causation. Physical activity can support young people's physical and mental health, said Nagata. We found that teens who were more active during the pandemic reported stronger emotional well-being and felt more socially connected to others. On average, teens who reported 2 hours of physical activity per week during the pandemic. These estimates were lower for teens of color who reported an average of 90 minutes per week. We noticed different racial and socioeconomic disparities in physical activity that may reflect unequal access to safe outdoor recreational spaces, says Dr. Kyle Ganson, assistant professor at University of Toronto, this faculty. Parents should encourage their children to move more and sit less, said Nagata. Despite disruptions from the pandemic, consider doing activities as a family, going outdoors, participating in virtual exercise classes. Next article. A novel compound might defeat multi-drug resistant bacteria common in hospitals. Okay. Got my own comments on this one and then I'll read a bit of the article. So I don't know if you guys know this, but one of the biggest breakthroughs in the 20th century, you guys know the story of penicillin? So if you go back about 100 or so years ago, There was this fungus that was growing. I want to say it was an orange peel. I couldn't get that detail right. It's found like, oh, it's killing all this bacteria. It was either the first or one of the first antibiotics. And it was like if you had any kind of bacterial infection, say like the 1940s, then just take some penicillin and you're good to go. But what happens is that human technology and nature play off each other. So you kill off the bacteria, but then maybe there's like a few bacteria cells left behind that have a little bit more resistance to the drug, and over time develops antibiotic resistance. And it's gotten to the point now where penicillin is not any longer a very effective medication. Like maybe it has a few applications, but it doesn't really do. And there's starting to pop up bacterial strains that we have no treatment for at all. We just got nothing. May have heard of MRSA, MRSA. So this is I mean, we're living through a pandemic right now. We see there could be possibly some parallel type of problem we run into, maybe in your guys' lifetimes that involves something like this. Side story that this kind of reminded me of is like farmers separating seeds, say like their seeds they want to grow for crops versus weeds, right? We don't want weeds growing in the field, right? So what do you want to do? Well, separate the good seeds from the bad seeds, right? But what if there are some seeds for weeds that look kind of similar to the food crop seeds? Well, by throwing out all the ones that obviously don't look like anything similar, then you're leaving behind the ones that do. Those ones are selected for, and it's gotten to a point now where I forget exactly what food crop it is, but the food crop and the weed seeds look identical, and there's just no way to tell them apart even using machine. So they all just kind of get planted, and that's just the way it is now. It's a similar type of dynamic between technology and evolutionary biology. All right, so to this article, bacterial DNA extracted from soil, researchers discovered a compound related to the antibiotic colistin. For years, public health experts have been sounding the alarm about the next phase in humanity's coexistence with bacteria, a dark future where emerging strains have rendered once powerful antibiotics useless. The United Nations recently projected that unless new drugs are developed, multi-drug resistant infections will force up to 24 million people into extreme poverty in the next decade and cause 10 million annual deaths by 2050. 10 million, that's approximately the population of New York City. So every year, scientists are especially apprehensive about a broad group of bacteria that circulate in hospitals and can dodge not only blockbuster drugs like penicillin and tetracycline, but even colistin, an antibiotic long used as a crucial last option. When colistin fails, there is often no effective antibiotic for patients with multi-drug resistant infections. Now, Rockefeller scientists report on their discovery of a compound that could potentially outmaneuver colistin resistance. In animal experiments, this prospective antibiotic was highly potent against dangerous opportunistic pathogens like this Latin name, the most common cause of infections in healthcare settings. Published in Nature, the findings could make it possible to develop a new class of antibiotics to combat strains responding to no other treatments. Okay, two other sections here. We got evolutionary wars. I'll read a little bit of this. And then like colistin, but better. So evolutionary wars. Colistin has long been abundantly used in the livestock industry and more recently in the clinic. The overuse is believed to have put a staunch evolutionary pressure on bacteria, compelling them to develop new traits to survive. As a result, some species have acquired a new gene called MCR1 that evades colistin's toxicity, making these bacteria resistant to the drug. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have ever come across this, but just raising farm animals like livestock, like pigs and cattle and chickens and sheep. There's a lot of antibiotics that's involved in that factory farming process, and that's putting this evolutionary pressure to become antibiotic resistant. Okay. Let's skip a few paragraphs here. Like colistin, but better. His team used an innovative approach that sidesteps the limitations of traditional methods for antibiotics discovery. Instead of growing bacteria in the lab and fishing for compounds that they produce, researchers search for bacterial DNA for the corresponding genes. And sifting through more than 10,000 bacterial genomes, they found 35 groups of genes that they predicted would produce colistin-like structures. One group looked particularly interesting as it included genes that were sufficiently different from those coding for colistin to suggest that they would produce a functionally distinct version of the drug. Okay, so it goes on a little bit more, but you guys get the gist of that. I like this next one. This asteroid sample could reveal our solar system's origin story. And so you guys are looking at a close-up picture of an asteroid here. Throw in a few comments first before I start reading this article. While you guys are checking out this picture, close-up picture of this asteroid. So make sure this is still, yeah, it's back on there. So our solar system in planet Earth, do you guys know how old the Earth is? Like how old it's been determined to be? Yeah. Carl knows about off the top of his head, about 4.5 billion years old. Okay. And the way that they figured this out is, well, if you look at looking at rocks, right? Specifically rocks that have uranium in them. And I'll tell you guys why. Right? So uranium is radioactive. It'll slowly decay to other elements, and it goes through this chain process until it reaches lead. Once it hits lead, it's stable. It doesn't decay anymore. Okay? And well, that process takes time. And if you can calculate or experimentally determine how much time it takes to go from for this process to happen to turn from uranium to lead, if you pick up a rock that's all uranium, say, well, this is like a new rock. This was just created maybe from a nova, from some star, or something like that. If it's all lead, then okay, well, billions of years have passed and it's gone through this process. And if you know the specific quantities of uranium and lead, you can figure out the ratio and determine the age of the rock. This has been done for rocks all over the Earth, and the oldest ones have been found to be about 4.5 billion years old. So what happened 4.5 billion years ago? I mean, nobody was there, nobody knows, but one of the popular hypotheses is that our sun used to be, our sun is probably like a second or third stage star, and that it used to be bigger, and that at some point in the past it went no bigger. Nobody knows, this is just a hypothesis, but at some point maybe it went nova and created all the elements in our solar system now. The mixture of elements is pretty consistent all around our solar system, and it's specific to our solar system. Like if you want to know what's the ratio of like lead to iron and in our solar system, right? Well, it's kind of unique for us, and it's unique for different solar systems. Hinting that came from one particular nova. And by say going to this asteroid, sending a space probe, what they do is send a space probe here, got a soil sample, and is sending it back to Earth. You can make measurements that could give insight into ideas like that. You guys see a periodic table of the elements up here on the wall? Do you guys know the heaviest element that you'll find in nature? The biggest one you'll find in nature in our solar system? This guy right here, number 92, uranium. Now, actually, there is plutonium in the environment, 94. That's 2 elements up. Like, where am I going with this? So, all the plutonium in the environment has only ever existed since 1945, when we started doing, dropping atomic bombs. So, going with the sun nova hypothesis, if that's where all the elements in our solar system came from 4.5 billion years ago, the size of that nova explosion would only have allowed for elements up to uranium. But possibly other solar systems maybe have some of the higher elements like plutonium and some of the other ones. All right, so that's a premise into the story. Dig into this. Just over a year after Japan's Hayabusa 2 mission returned the first subsurface sample of an asteroid to Earth. Ooh, that's exciting. Scientists have determined that the near-Earth asteroid Ryugu is a pristine remnant from the formation of our solar system. This was the first material to be returned to Earth from a carbon-rich asteroid. There are different classifications of asteroid. I want to say another one is like a silica-based, but this is carbon-rich. The asteroid can reveal how our cosmic corner of the universe was formed. The organic hydrated materials locked within these asteroids could also shed light on the origin of the building blocks of life. Ryugu is a dark diamond-shaped asteroid that measures about 1 kilometer wide. Hayabusa 2 collected one sample from the asteroid surface in 2019, fired a copper bullet into the asteroid to create a 33-foot wide impact crater. The sample was collected July 2019. Then Hayabusa 2 flew by Earth and dropped the sample off in Australia last December. The C-type or carbonaceous asteroid is much darker than scientists originally thought, only reflecting about 2% of light that hits from it. I'm going to wrap up what I'm doing here, but they got 5.5 grams of sample, which is more than the 1 gram that they expected. For context, your guys' smallest lab weight is 10 grams. So they got about half of that, and they're really happy with that. I'm going to do some soil analysis. These last ones here. Majority of Colorado children have lead in their blood. 72% of kids under 6 in Colorado have, well, too much lead. Bad day for them. Scientists figured out which animals were in a zoo just by taking DNA from the air. They use this fancy looking tool. And so that's pretty cool. We got Azteca ants repair damage to these host plants. Okay, so some kind of symbiosis going on, I think is what you call it. We got stem cell therapy for burns story so far. So got worldwide burn injuries affect 11 million people a year. And got some new stem cell therapy. All right, you guys have a great weekend, and we'll start simple harmonic motion on Monday.